Hey guys, this is Daniel from Longview Leather, and today we're going to be talking about making the passport wallet kit. Just like in our other videos, this kit can be constructed with a few tools that you may already have, and if not, our online store will have you covered. This passport wallet features 2 card pockets, a bill compartment, and a slot for your passport. Every kit comes with vegetable tan leather components, which will allow you to add your own unique flair to this project with things like leather tooling, stamping, dyes, acrylic paints, or a combination of all of these things. With that being said, let's get this thing going. Every kit comes with one 5-ounce Wicken & Craig vegetable tan exterior piece, 3 2 to 3 ounce Wicken & Craig vegetable tan pocket components, one spool of Ritza tiger thread in a color and weight of your choice, and 2 harness needles that will coincide with the thread weight that you've chosen. To build this project, you'll require a few tools that I will list below. A wood slicker or a hand burnisher. This is going to be used to put a burnish or finish our edges. Skidmore's leather cream. This is going to be used to seal up our project after we're done with our dyeing. A dye of your choice. Today we're using a jet black dye from Angelus, or feel free to leave this natural with a finish on it to develop a nice patina over time. Gum tragacanth, or a burnishing solution of your choice. This will be used in conjunction with the wood slicker to finish your edges. Sandpaper. We're using a 150 grit. You could even get away with maybe a 130 or go even higher than that depending on what level of smoothness you're looking for on the edges. We've determined that 150 will do just fine for what we're looking to do today. Wing divider. We're going to be using this to check our spacing for our stitching holes from the edges of our passport wallet. A leather working hammer. This is just going to be used to flatten out our stitches after we're done with our hand stitching. A rawhide or poly mallet. In today's case, we're using a rawhide mallet because that's what we have here in the shop. An edger. Today we're using a number 1 Jeremiah Watt quick change common edger. Diamond punches. We're using these to pierce our leather to create our stitching holes. We're using a 4mm spacing and have both a 9-prong and 2-prong for today's project. Adhesive. We're using a barge cement, but a leathercraft cement or your preferred adhesive will work as well. Scratch all. We'll use this to mark where our pockets will be ending or for any general marking. So there's a few suggested things that you may want to have in your workspace just to make your life a little bit easier. These were not featured in the beginning of the video just because some of these things are bigger and don't really fit in frame as well, but you will see them being used in the video, so I'll just call those out right now so you have an idea. A stitching horse or pony. This is definitely going to make your life easier when it comes to hand stitching. Think of it as like a third set of hands just to be able to hold your project so you can work with needles in both hands. A granite slab or a solid surface for flattening your stitches, or any general punching or hammering. I would say that this is a pretty common thing in most leather shops. So if you're looking to track one down, I believe you can find them at most counter places, or even if you're looking for something fairly thick, a monument maker may have some scrap marble or granite kicking around that he might be willing to part with for a fair price. A poly block, we use this for our diamond punching. If you don't have a poly block, a poly kitchen board will work in a pinch as well. They're fairly affordable and you can find them at most grocery stores or an IKEA in your area. A soldering iron or a flame, this is going to be used to melt your thread ends once we've cut our thread. Thread nippers, this is going to be used for cutting your thread. If you don't have these, you can pick them up at a sewing store, or feel free just to use a standard pair of scissors. Those will work just fine. A place designated to dye your leather, preferably not where you're going to be doing your general assembly, as you don't want to get other things covered in dye. What we do here is we really just kind of pull out a big piece of scrap paper and we'll lay it down. A newspaper, something like that would work well. And we're just, it's something that we can take away and remove once we're done our dyeing. Latex gloves, definitely used in the dyeing process. You may want them for applying your gum trag, your finish, anywhere where you don't want to get your hands dirty. Definitely a handy thing to have around. Rags for applying leather finish and for buffing. I would definitely recommend having these around. It'll just help you apply your finish. I mean, you could do it with a dauber or things like that, but I find a rag works really well in this process. And lastly, knowledge of hand stitching. We're going to touch briefly on this in the video, but it would be wise to have an idea of how this is working because, watching me explain it and seeing the video, it can be kind of confusing. I would definitely recommend watching a more in-depth tutorial on how to hand stitch, or, as I did, read the book, The Art of Hand Stitching by Al Stolman. Okay, so let's talk about dyeing our leather. If you plan on tooling or embossing your leather, you'll definitely want to do this prior to this step, as we're concentrating strictly on the assembly of this item. I'm just throwing down some dye on this leather because I prefer the look of black leather, and this is ultimately the look that I'm going for. Again, if you want to leave this natural, feel free to do so. I just find black, hides the dirt if you're in, a more dirty environment, as I tend to find myself. So today we're using a Angelus Jet Black dye, as mentioned before. It's a spirit-based dye, which means that if you do need to do any thinning with these dyes, it can be done with an isopropyl alcohol. Every box comes with a dauber, and the neat thing about these boxes is that if you flip them over on their side, there's actually a little cardboard punch out which allows the bottle of dye to sit inside the box, and it will definitely prevent the bottle from tipping, which is pretty cool. I've definitely been a little careless in the shop and not paid attention to where my hands were going, and I've knocked over some dyes in the past. So I mean, this definitely doesn't completely mitigate it, but it will do a very good job of preventing it, as long as you're wary of where your dye is. After we've dyed all the components, we will leave our pieces out to dry and move on to the next step. A little note on the drying time, it'll definitely depend on the environment that you're working in, but leaving your item to sit for a few hours should be suitable. So once our item is dry, we will apply our sealant to the leather. For today's case, as mentioned, we are using a Skidmore's leather cream. It contains natural oils and beeswax, and it definitely makes your leather a little bit softer, which I'm definitely going for here with this passport wallet. It'll make the folding process, I think, a little bit easier. And with the wax inside the cream, it'll make your item more water resilient. You'll probably need to reapply this finish down the road if you do go the route of using the Skidmore's leather cream, as it is a natural finish. It will tend to wear off over time, but it's a natural cream. I feel a lot better about using this stuff than, say putting on something that's chemical or will block the pores of the leather. It's a nice cream, and I do put it on a lot of the things that I make. And, if you are looking to refinish something, it's certainly good for that as well. So you'll want to apply a subtle amount of cream to your cloth and use that to work into the passport components once they're all dyed and dried. Every card holder pocket will come pre-marked with the center of this pocket dotted in outlines. We will then mark at the base of this outline with our wing divider and start our diamond punching at the intersection on the bottom. I then take my diamond punch and mark my stitching holes. Once your card pocket piece, the smaller of the two pockets, has been punched, we will take this piece and lay it on top of the cash slot, the bigger of the two pockets, and mark where the card holder pocket ends with our scratch awl. Once we know where the small pocket ends on the large pocket, we will take our sandpaper and rough up the surface of the rough side about 1/4 of an inch from mark to mark. We will then lay down our adhesive on the front or smooth side of the large pocket and the back or rough side of the small pocket and line up both pieces. Once our contact cement is dry, we will go ahead and punch all the way through both pockets, creating a spot for our stitches from front to back and attaching these two pockets in the center. Now that our stitching holes are in place, we will go ahead and determine our thread length. To do this, we measure the length of the stitching holes and times that distance by 6. We will then fasten our needles and move into our saddle stitching. When it comes to hand stitching, start by taking your material and loading it into your stitching horse or pony and have the smooth side of your leather facing on the sewer's right. We will then start our stitch at the top of the pocket and stitch back towards ourselves using a hand stitching technique. Load your needles into the hole furthest away from you and ensure there is one needle on either side. Then take your needles and make sure there is equal distance on each side by pulling up until your needles sit at the same distance. Load your needles into the hole furthest away from you and ensure there is one needle on either side. Then take your needles and make sure there is equal distance on each side. We will then start stitching towards ourselves by taking the needle in your left hand and going into the next hole. Once your needle is through, take the needle in your right hand and make a cross behind the needle and take that cross and flip so that the right hand needle will go back through the same hole on top of the left hand thread. Once through the hole with your right hand needle, take through the thread on the left side closest to you and loop over the right hand needle. Once our needles are both on each side, we will repeat these steps into the next hole closest to you. I also realize this may be very confusing listening to me explain this, as this is a fairly difficult technique to wrap your head around having never done this before. We would definitely recommend watching an in-depth tutorial on saddle stitching or reading the book The Art of Hand Stitching by Al Stolman before continuing with this if you're not comfortable. After we've gone ahead and stitched our pocket, we will back stitch for 3 stitches and we will go ahead and cut our threads off with about a 1/16 of an inch tail on each side of the thread. We will then take our soldering iron down and melt the tips until they disappear and use our leather working hammer to flatten our stitches on a solid surface. Once we have both pockets ready to be added to our passport exterior, we will lay these pockets down and mark where they end on the inside or rough side of the exterior. One thing to note here is that the passport pocket must be placed on the right side of the exterior facing you, as the bottom page of the passport will slide into this pocket. We will then take our scratch awl and mark where these pockets end on both sides. This mark will be the indicator of where your adhesive should stop. Once both sides are marked, we'll rough the backside or rough side of the pocket and exterior components 1/4 of an inch around the back or rough side to where the pocket lines end. These lines will indicate where you will stop gluing as well. Apply your contact cement 1/4 of an inch in from the edge of on both exterior and pocket pieces and fasten the pockets to the exterior piece, rough side to rough side, and use a firm pressure to press these pieces together. Roughly 2 hours of drying or longer would be ideal time for your adhesive to set depending on the environment you are in. When it comes to sanding our edges, we're going to use a 150 grit sandpaper to square them up. This will help when it comes to marking our stitching lines with a wing divider, as well as remove any excess glue and ensure that your pockets and interior nicely line up. Once you have sanded your edges, we will go ahead and run our wing divider around the outside of your exterior and mark the front side. The wing divider is set to 1/8 of an inch spacing from the edge. However, if you prefer a different distance, feel free to change accordingly, although we would recommend 1/8 of an inch for this project. Take your time and make your way around the passport wallet, and once finished, we will take our #1 quick change edger from Jeremiah Watt Tools and bevel our edges on both the front and back side of this wallet. I also want to take a minute to express how pleased I am with this tool. This set of edgers retails for under $70 Canadian and comes with sizes 0 to 4. The blades are super sharp and a real pleasure to use, and a nicely fitting ergonomic plastic handle that allows the blades to be changed out with ease. But it's tight enough that you don't feel any wiggle during use. As well, at a price of $12 per blade, you can almost throw these things away when they become dull. However, they can be resharpened to maintain an edge if you are capable of doing so. Next, we're going to move on to our diamond punching. Once we have marked with our wing divider and beveled our edges, we'll use our diamond punches to mark our way around the passport wallet's exterior. Use the line from the wing divider and place the points of your diamond punch into the line. You'll want to start on a straight area of the passport, as I have always found it easier to end your stitches prior to a curve. One thing to keep in mind with these diamond punches is to make sure that you're coming down straight into the leather. It helps to be looking kind of vertical, I think you would describe it as vertical into the diamond chisels, so that you can see what angle you're going to be driving these through at. If you lean too much to the left or right, you're going to be coming down and coming out the back side of the project on a weird spot, and your stitching is going to be all over the place. So you definitely don't want that. You want to make your way around and be sure to use the 2-prong chisel around the curves or the corners. Placing your punch in the last hole or two to ensure proper spacing, you'll make your way around until you get back to the initial hole. One thing to note here is that I have placed a scrap piece of 10-ounce thick leather on my poly block. This is done to make it easier to remove your punch after each strike and extend the life of your block and punch. Just like before, we will measure the distance around our passport holder with our thread and times that distance by 6. This is just a safe rule of thumb that I've always used and in most cases leaves me with enough slack. We will then take our thread ends and get the needles fastened. I do this by pulling the thread through the needle eyelet and then fold the needle back on itself and pierce through with the point of the needle. You'll repeat this on both sides. Just like the hand stitching for our pocket, we will repeat this process for the exterior of our passport wallet. Load your passport wallet into your horse and have the exterior facing to your right. And start stitching back towards yourself, repeating the process for the steps from earlier in the video. If you're not comfortable with this process by this point, we'd recommend rewatching the saddle stitching tutorial from prior, or preferably reading the book, The Art of Hand Stitching by Al Stolman. Once you come back to your previous stitches or where you started, you're going to overstitch by 3 stitches. Once your item is stitched, we will cut off our thread at a 1/16, or if you're using a flame, an 1/8 of an inch from the wallet and proceed to melting our thread ends down. Once we're done that, we're going to flatten our stitches on either side of our passport wallet with our leatherworking hammer. While there are plenty of ways to burnish your edges with lots of different tools, machines, and techniques, we're going to be doing this with a wood slicker and some gum trag. If you have a certain tool, solution, or a process to burnish your edges, we'd encourage you to do it, but this is how we're going to finish ours today, as it gives us a desirable result. I first take my gum trag solution and load it onto my edges with my finger, but feel free to use gloves or apply with a dauber of sorts. Once you have your gum trag on your designated area, you will use your wood slicker or hand burnisher and create friction by rubbing back and forth in a fast motion. Work your way around the edges of your passport wallet until you're getting a glossy and smooth result. This definitely takes some time, so if you aren't seeing what you're after, be sure to keep at it. All right, guys, so that wraps up our passport wallet build. This kit retails for $26.95 in our online store, and you can also find all of the tools and supplies featured in this video there as well. One thing to keep in mind is this kit is made of veg tan leather, and the pockets for holding the cards may be fairly tight, but will definitely loosen up over time, allowing more cards to fit in. One last thing is we are pretty new to this whole online video thing. We definitely want to be as helpful as possible. So if there's things that we can do or things you'd like to see in upcoming videos or things that you didn't like, please let us know so we can address those things and make these videos as helpful as possible. So that's all from us for today, and we will catch you guys on the next build.